I went into music not because I thought I could make a living with it. I went into music because I knew very well that I could not live without it. It makes a difference. At the age of 7, I first held a clarinet in my hand. On that very first day, the music teacher, Leo M. Underwood, who had come from Missouri to Wichita Falls, Texas, to start a community band, told my father, if Leon will practice, work hard, and excel at this instrument, he will become a very rich man, not in money necessarily, but in the doors which his music will open for him, as well as the many friends who will become a part of his life. That prediction has come true in my life, since I've been able to do things that otherwise I could only have dreamed about, and have known people who would have never been part of my life otherwise. I feel that I'm richer this very day for having this opportunity to be with you friends in music. My first professional playing job was at the Woodman of the World Lodge Hall in Wichita Falls. I was a very young player. I made $1 playing for 4 hours and my lip bled for a day or so, but that dollar was beautiful to me. During my high school days, I played in a fiddle band in honky-tonks of North Texas and Oklahoma. Many of these places were not exactly first class, to say the least. Our leader played bass, carried a loaded .38 and a shoulder holster as he played, and was the only other person in the group who could read. I'm not talking about music, English. Later I was able to perform, I mean that with loving some of the finest musicians I've ever heard in my life. Absolutely marvelous. Later I was able to perform in just about every type of group on earth, from polka bands to opera orchestra, symphony orchestra, and so forth. In New York, my close friend Don Gillis, known to many of you, that name would ring a bell, helped me to work some at NBC for several shows there. Arthur Fiedler, in his home in Boston one evening, offered me the arranging position for the Boston Pops, a position that Leroy Anderson was vacating in a few weeks. Stan Kenton willed his entire library to North Texas State. Upon his death, I had made a promise that I would personally go through every sheet of anything he ever sent us, not knowing that in his will he had left in my office 6 large crates weighing 2,440 pounds. Imagine that much music representing 40-some-odd years of his life. And I'm now going through that with great reverence. I could go on and on, but suffice it to say that my being a rich man, with all of these wonderful experiences, did become a reality because music made it possible, as my first teacher had predicted. A turning point in my life came when I had to decide whether or not I would join the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra or complete my master's degree. At this juncture in my life, many long hours of discussions with my dear wife, Bonna, now a part of my life for almost 38 years, by the way. Reminds me of what one of my assistants in the office walked in one day and he said, you know, I've had 21 happy years of marriage. And he said, that's not bad out of 35, is it? Caused me to decide to continue the educational route to its logical conclusion rather than interrupt my education. I suppose that one thing which helped to determine this was the fact that I had grown up in the Depression days and remembered the words of my father as he reminisced about what his life would have been if his own education had not been interrupted by the need to support his family and pay those bills. It was an extremely hard decision. I loved the Dorsey Band and wanted to be a part of it. I've just referred to my own father. Those of you who are parents will most certainly understand our deep pride and gratitude that our own son worked his way through college, continued his music throughout, and is today the principal clarinetist with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. As I entered the educational scene as a teacher, it became quite evident early on that it would be a challenge. My students were too old to spank and not quite old enough to be adults. Also, they were in that period of rebellion which comes when one leaves home for the first time and goes off to college to change the world. I can only say that my years of professional playing paid off time after time during a total of 37 years of teaching and administrative duties, 22 at North Texas State, as was stated, in the second largest school of music in this nation. Some facts might interest you about my work at NTSU. Imagine the responsibility for auditioning and placing into one of our bands the following: 125 saxophonists, 105 trumpets, 75 trombones, from 30 to 50 each of piano, guitar, and bass, and 70 to 75 drummers. During several semesters, we had 17 big bands rehearsing regularly. The students ranged from those still learning scales to those who were almost equal to the top professionals in the country, except for the fact that they just did not have that practical experience. I remember turning to the pianist in our 1 o'clock band, the best band in North Texas, and asking him if he knew Love Letters in the Sand. Someone had requested it. Remember, he was truly a fantastic player, technically and creatively. He looked up at me with long hair flying in the breeze and said, "What's that, a disease?" One drummer walked into my office one day and told me very seriously, "Mr. Breeden, I've been playing in a trio in Dallas, but I had to quit the other night. They had 2 clicks going, and I wasn't in either one of them." These things help make your day. Now permit me to mention a few highlights of my life as an educator in music, which will be perhaps inspirational to you. I digress just for a second to say, I believe that when one goes into teaching, one enters a profession. When one becomes a true educator, one accepts a calling, which is a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week involvement, where even in the middle of the night you wake up thinking of how can I serve my program or my students better. I've tried hard to transcend merely a teacher status and to be truly an educator. That has been my goal anyway. In the early 60s, we performed at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, on the same stage, I mean the identical lumber, on which Winston Churchill made his famous first reference to the Iron Curtain. Our jazz band received the second standing ovation in the history of that city, according to what the mayor told us after the concert. Sir Winston received the first one. In 1967, we performed in 19 cities in Mexico. In many cities, we could not speak their language and they could not speak ours, but the warmth of the audiences gave strong evidence to the power of music to move people in a most positive way. I feel strongly that the effective educator in music addresses himself or herself totally to that part of man's possibilities which work for good. Music can and does brighten the lives of mankind and lifts a heavy heart, often when nothing else seems to help. As you know, it takes literally thousands of hours to perfect musical ability, a great investment in the purchase and upkeep of musical instruments, and also a great investment in instruction. One must have an inner discipline beyond the ordinary, a strong purpose, and a desire to brighten the lives of our fellow man if he or she is to become a true musician, an artist, if you will. It takes an artist to touch a cold piece of wood or metal and be able to communicate, to even bring tears of happiness, and even to save lives. I mean that last one very sincerely and deeply, save lives. Music has saved me through a number of tragedies which might otherwise have destroyed me. Many of you have experienced these. A few of ours, our 19-year-old son killed by a hit-and-run accident. My brother committed suicide about 3 years ago. My sister killed at a very young age by a careless technician in a hospital. We've gone through years, 30 years now, of a retarded daughter with, 100 doctors, I guess, at least, so forth and so forth. My music, and I must add hastily my family also, of course, but the music played a vital part in saving me and causing me to want to go on and keep living. And I think it does it for many, many people. We have done all in our power to help to make it known to our young musicians that drugs and music don't mix. In every orientation session with our entire program, I have made a point to make sure they did not dilute their musicianship with crutches of any kind. If they were good enough, I said, you don't need that. You can let your horn speak for you. I'm happy that most of our university players have avoided letting this mixture destroy them. There have been a few, but these do not prove that music did it. I've never believed that. It would probably have happened to them in any other profession. It is what's inside one, not what one is doing with some instrument that causes problems. One local musician, known for his sense of humor, drove up to the gate of the Narcotics Rehabilitation Hospital in Fort Worth a few years ago. You know who it is. And when the elder guard leaned over to the window of his car and asked him, "Do you have any firearms or drugs?" he replied, "Only enough for myself." We have not had any of those to my knowledge. As one who has worked for many years with young people, I would encourage you to be willing to listen to these young people. Realize that the world is changing and try to pass on to them the benefit of your many years of experience. Sometimes the one who seems to question everything is merely searching for assurance that music will enable him or her to reach that goal in life which they so desire. I can truthfully tell you that I've seen some of these same kids who seem to rebel against everything turn down paying jobs to go perform with us at the Denton State School for retarded children, free of charge, without getting a penny for it. Several of these strong-willed, creative kids almost cried in my office when I told them one day that we were going to invite all of our blind students to come to all of our concerts in the future free of charge. All I can say is that long hair, that frustrated look on the face, and those seemingly revolting kids have often fooled me completely. When given a chance to truly find themselves with encouragement to develop what is inside them instead of being judged only by their exterior. In closing, let me mention 4 general items which have been stressed to the students with whom I have come into contact during my years of teaching. I have told the students to consider using these 4 cornerstones as a basis for their life in music, whether as performer and or teacher. I'll digress for 1 second. Every student that came into my office, I lost my son, or we lost our son. I keep saying I, but it's just because I'm here and my dear wife's back in Denton today. We lost our son in 1968. Can you imagine every conference that I had from that day forward when a young man his age, somewhat similar in appearance, would come into my office to seek help from me? Can you imagine the depth of that conversation and how seriously I took every word I was going to say to that young person? I tried to envision someone helping my son, and I think it may have given me, out of each tragedy comes some positive, and I think I've tried to turn those positives in and help erase that negative. These are the cornerstones I've mentioned to my students. 1, remember always to avoid what many are guilty of, namely loving things and using people. Try to go the other way. Love people and use things. 2, remember always the old saying, wouldn't it be nice to be as sure about anything as some people are about everything? 3 of the most important words that you will ever learn in your entire life are as follows: I don't know. Remember that often it is truly wonderful when you can wait before expressing an opinion about something you know absolutely nothing about. We don't have to have an opinion on everything. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know, but I'm going to study it. I want to get both sides of the problem, and then I'll tell you exactly how I feel. I've tried to point that out to the kids, not to just pop off and say, well, I don't believe that. 4, one final thing. If you go into teaching and possibly become an administrator someday, remember the words of the Yale University president to the president of Ohio State. Always be kind to your A and B students. Someday one of them will return to your campus as a fine professor. Be especially kind to your C students, because someday one of them will come back and build you a $2 million school of music building. Thank you for your kind invitation. I hope that God will bless your efforts as you try to keep working to support music and help to make this a better world in which we can all live. Thank you so much.